Hey, I'm Jeff Skversky. Today on Inside the Huddle, presented by Sportskeeda, I catch up with Washington Commanders reporter and insider for ESPN, John Keim. He always has the latest breaking information and inside scoops on the Commanders. And yes, there is a lot to talk about with this team from top to bottom, from ownership, Daniel Snyder, and what could transpire with him as he's being investigated for the workplace misconduct culture in Washington, down to the quarterback, Carson Wentz, and what this offense may look like this season. Of course, it's been a quarterback carousel in Washington. Well, Wentz finally provides some stability. We'll talk about that and more with ESPN NFL reporter John Keim, who has covered the team since 1994. You can read him on ESPN.com, as well as check him out on Twitter, John_Keim. He also has his own podcast, The John Keim Report. John, thanks for joining me. I guess down there in Washington, it's never a dull day. I imagine you're afraid to take vacations, right? Because you never know what may happen.
Well, okay. So a little story on that. First of all, you're right. And it's never a dull month. It's never a dull week. It's never a dull year covering this team. So my wife and I planned this trip to Spain. We booked it in January. My son is a dancer. He's performing overseas there. And when we booked it, I kind of said to my wife, this is when the hearings are going to be, when we're gone. Sure enough, the hearings were when we were in Spain. And fortunately, I had a partner, Tisha Thompson, who took over, but it was predictable because it always happens with this team. I have like multiple stories of life events being interrupted, not because of some football situation, but because of some letter that Congress is sending to the FTC or team attorneys are sending to the FTC. I had an aunt, my wife's aunt died earlier this spring. And 10 minutes before we found out about her situation, like she was basically in hospice and dying. And 10 minutes before that, I got 25-page letter from Congress that they were sending to the FTC. And so you have to deal with that before you can deal with the other. And fortunately, my wife could go be with her aunt, but it was, things like that. And on Easter Sunday, I'm getting a 105-page letter that the team is sending to the FTC. So that's a longer answer than you probably wanted on that, but that is an example of how it typically is, where you really don't, every week there's going to be, with the situation right now, every week there's going to be something.
Yeah, I mean, look, Easter Sunday, the Eagles traded Donovan McNabb to the Redskins, the Commanders, on Easter Sunday.
Yes, and I was about ready to, I finally got, it was like around 8 o'clock, I poured a glass of red wine, I think, and it got through the day. And then that happened. So yes, I remember that one very well. But that's a football thing, right?
Right.
So maybe like that, but at least it's a football related situation, not letters to the FTC. That's where it gets crazy here, is it's not trades I get. They happen at any time. But FTC letters, Congress, come on.
All right. Well, I won't tie up your off time too much, but I did want to know, before we kind of got started, did Washington and FedEx Field ever address the railing issue that happened last year during that Eagles game where all the fans fell in front of Jalen Hurts? I mean, that was insane. I've never seen that at a NFL or a professional sports arena or stadium in the United States. Did they address that? Whatever came of that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I believe they have buttressed those areas. That was an area where after the fact you hear, well, that's not where fans are supposed to be after a game, and that the security guards somebody allowed them to come into that area. And it is like, you see that area, it's designed for handicap seating.
Right.
But if that's the case, you've got to be strict about that enforcement. I'm not going to blame fans for going in there, because if you can go down there, you're going to go down there. And
right.
But I believe, if I remember right, it has been, that area has been fortified, I guess. And I don't think we'll see a similar, whether it happens again or not, I don't think you're going to see a similar, reinforcement of that area. I believe that has been reinforced. And, it's funny you say that, because of all the things that have happened, I'm like, oh yeah, that happened too. So It kind of gets lost down here. But yes, it's something that, like that that like FedEx for years, part of the problem for this current group is that the previous administration with the football, business side and all that, they really didn't put a lot of money into, people might be shocked to hear this, they didn't put a lot of money into improving FedEx. And so you get some of the stuff that's been happening the last couple of years where it's clear that there either needs to be upgrades or just things that need to be fixed.
Well, I remember seeing Jalen Hurts trying to help fans off the field that fell in front of him. And I'm thinking, first of all, are those fans okay? One, I've never seen an athlete come off the field and be helping fans. Then on top of that, thinking, okay, there's COVID, God forbid a fan gives it to an Eagles player and then it starts spreading. So there's a lot going on in my head, but all right, thankfully, hopefully that is.
And just imagine if Jalen Hurts is 5 feet to his left.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, because then it's like they're falling on him. And that's how close it was to it was a bad situation to begin with and dangerous, but it could have been a lot worse especially from his perspective.
Call me crazy, but I feel like Washington could be one of these surprise teams in the NFL this year. I mean, you bring in Carson Wentz, Ron Rivera going into year 3. Am I nuts, or could this be a team that surprises a lot of people?
Well, first of all, as we know in the NFC East, it's always that you can kind of exclude the Giants right now. So in that 3, it always seems like it's the surprise team that ends up winning, And so like the Eagles, they didn't win it last year, but they were a surprise team last year, given all that they had going into the season. And so I don't think it's a big stretch to see that because it's so hard to repeat in this division for whatever reason. But I do think they can be a surprise team too. I don't know what their ceiling is yet. I kind of look at them as like I could see them getting to 10 wins because you look at, first of all, they all have an easier schedule this year. Everybody, and they're one of them.
Yeah, but you know what? I always say that going in, or you look, the Eagles have had the easiest schedule in the NFL the last couple of years, and then it turns out by the end of the season, it's voted the hardest. And so
it's a bad way to go based on last year. So yes,
yeah.
But when I looked at what they had faced last year, just even in terms of the quarterbacks they played a year ago, they played just about every top quarterback. You knew it was going to be tough for that defense to repeat simply because of that. So, they built their high rankings in 2020 off of playing a lot of backup quarterbacks or lesser quarterbacks. And there were a couple that would be around that top 10 area, Kyler Murray or whatever. But by and large, last year they're playing Mahomes, Brady, Rodgers, Dak Prescott a couple of times. So there was a major difference in the quality of quarterbacks that led to the downfall. They're not facing the same level this year. That helps. Then I think you look at, this is a team that won 7 games, that if you want to build the case for optimism, if you're a Washington fan, they won 7 games. They had a brutal, brutal finish with COVID and injuries. And when they played the Eagles in that, I guess it ended to be the Tuesday night game, they're starting Garrett Gilbert, for God's sake. Right. He had been here for 3 or 4 days. I think he had like 2 practices. So that's a situation they were in. And so you can say, okay, well, they're better at quarterback. And I know Eagles fans might look at Carson Wentz, but it tells you what's happened down here that I can say that authoritative. And it should open up the offense with what he can do for them. Plus, I think Jahan Dotson is a good pickup for them in the first round at receiver to complement McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, if he stays healthy. So I think there's reason for optimism on that defense. So, on that offense to be better. So that's where you can say, like, yeah, I can see that. There are questions, to be honest, probably more questions on defense overall. Like, I think Carson Wentz, the question with him is, well, how good can he be here? Is he the same guy? Has he learned? Has he matured? But the bottom line is he's better than Taylor Heineke. Right. So like it's the question is what level does he get to? But defensively, the question would be, when does Chase Young come back? How is that back 7?
Yeah, absolutely. And then when you look at this team overall, it's not just when you talk about the Commanders, what's going on the field, it's what's going on off the field. And maybe it's the national perspective, but it just seems like there's so much turmoil. There's dysfunction, things like that going on with this organization. Look, I mean, owner Daniel Snyder, he's going to, I guess, testify for the House Oversight Committee at the end of the month. as they're investigating the workplace culture. The NFL fined them a record $10 million. What do you expect to come from this when it's all said and done?
Well, I'd be surprised if he testifies. And so we'll start there. Well, he offered dates, but there's other things they have to negotiate for it to actually happen. So there's other parameters
it's
around.
Not definite. It's not definite because
not definite. First of all, they have to accept those dates. Congress does, and then secondly, there are some other factors to negotiate to get to the point where he would actually testify. And I still talk to people who don't expect it to happen. So we'll see. I don't know, but right now, I'd say I would bet against it more so than for it. So
even on the video conference, I understand in person's maybe off the question, but if he gets subpoenaed, that's a different story.
Well, they can't serve. The U.S. Marshals cannot serve a subpoena when he's overseas. So he's on his boat overseas. So that's one. Then there's going to be a question of, and we wrote a story about this last week, but there's going to be a question of, is he allowed to testify voluntarily, or will it be off the subpoena? Because if it's off the subpoena, then he's under oath.
Okay.
So there becomes a difference. So they got to negotiate that. And then I think there's something with, do you limit the scope of the questions to the things that were covered under the NDA, or do you go beyond that? So there are things they still have to negotiate to get to the point where he is actually going to testify. Those also happen to be the last two dates that Congress is in session before breaking for all of August. So I don't, right now, if I had to bet, I'm not going to bet that he'll testify. Maybe something changes. Maybe the negotiation is such that he's like, I'm okay with this, and they're okay with it, and then you go. So, and it would not be a public viewing. It would be a private deposition, and then it's on Congress whether or not they want to release what was said in there. And so I think there's still a ways to go before we see him actually testify. And then after that, it's usually about midterm elections. So I don't know that we'll ever see him testify. So as far as the other stuff.
But what do you think will come of this? Forget all the semantics of the overall big picture. Do you think anything will come of this, or you've covered this team a long time? What is your opinion?
Well,
what is your take?
I know what fans here want, which is he going to sell the team? And is he going to be forced to sell the team? And I don't know that we're at that point. I would say there's probably more sentiment now than there was 6 months ago to maybe there's more owners willing to not worry about setting a precedent of just voting a guy out for certain things. And because I think, the fear had always been, and I definitely think there's owners that still think this way, where the fear is, well, it sets a bad precedent. If we vote him out, who's he going to come after in court? Like, what skeletons are in my closet that might be exposed? Right. I don't want exposed. That's going to be, and people have to remember, like, these guys live in a different world than most other people, than I would say, than the regular folks. So what might seem obscene and all that for us might be viewed differently. And I'm not absolving anybody of any behavior. I'm just trying to, why wouldn't they do this? And I think that's part of it. And so I think there's still, you started to hear some things after the owners' meetings about how maybe there's some others that are willing to do it. I know Jarrett Bell wrote a story on this. But it only takes 8 owners to say no. And then he's not going. So I don't know what's going to happen from all of this, from the congressional stuff. I think the interesting thing to watch is what does Mary Jo White, who is for the NFL, investigating an allegation made by a former employee about some alleged sexual misconduct by Snyder. That's when the NFL is still investigating. That's the new part of all this. So, if the NFL decides something, would they suspend him? I don't know. I can't even speculate on that because I don't know. But I think that's something to watch whenever they reach that conclusion.
But Daniel Snyder is not controlling the day-to-day operations, correct?
Right. And his wife,
Tanya,
was named a co-CEO a year ago. And so he's focused, according to the NFL, his focus is on the getting a new stadium and big picture operations. Tanya is more involved in the day-to-day. they're both involved. I mean,
but let's cut to the chase. I mean, at the end of the day, is a big decision, like bringing in Carson Wentz, or
they're bringing in Carson Wentz. Dan Snyder is absolutely involved.
Of course,
you're not going to spend the money and the trade capital to get a quarterback without telling the owner and inform. I think Ron Rivera probably talks to him a couple times a week just to keep him informed. It's not like you can check in by phone. I mean, he's been overseas for a few months though. So you can check in by phone and all that. He's not in the building certainly not on a daily basis because he's overseas. So, and he hasn't been in the building on a daily basis in a long time. So that's something that's already changed. Is that enough to make a difference there? I don't know. I think they still have a lot of challenges within the organization. And part of the challenge is every time they try to move ahead on something, Congress sends another letter, or something else happens with this whole situation that pushes everything to the past. And so, but as far as his involvement, he'll be involved in big decisions. If they're going to spend for a free agent, if they're going to sign Terry McLaurin, of course he's going to be involved. And the other thing is, Jeff, the NFL, when they made this announcement, I guess it was a year ago, about the fine, they fined the team $10 million. They said that Snyder would step away from day to day. They never call it a suspension, and they never really spelled out what does that mean. What does that mean as far as what he's allowed to do or not allowed to do? What I do know is that in the spring, Roger Goodell at the league meeting said that this setup would continue until the foreseeable future and wouldn't change until they met, and they have not yet met.
All right, let's talk about, you touched on it there, Terry McLaurin, obviously huge deal. You get him after he skipped a bunch of offseason workouts, things like that. He is locked in. How much does that potentially stabilize things, not only off the field, but of course on the field?
Well, I think let's look at off the field first. He was a necessary signing because of what he means to the fan base. That's there were a lot of fans who, all the stuff that's happened here, they would say, if they don't sign him, I'm out. I'm like, that's what it's going to take. It was all the stuff that's happened, and it's this. If you don't sign McLaurin, I'm out. So
I never buy that. But I never buy that stuff. I never buy that stuff.
I don't either, but it's what they were saying. And so, but it really highlights his importance to the fan base, to the organization. He is they view him as someone who was a great find, but also a great representative of the organization. And, when I first talked to him, the last time we were in the locker room was his rookie year. So being around him, I remember coming away thinking this guy acts like a 10-year vet. There's a different maturity level. I'm an Ohio State guy. So I followed his career there. And what I knew about him was the leadership and all that. And I remember before the draft referred to him as a culture changer. And he is. Now his talent, where he's gone with it, has surprised me and anybody else who watched him, because that's not what he showed in college to the same level. But who he is as a person was what they needed there. So they need a guy like that in their organization as a leader, as a spokesperson for the organization. And so I think that was a big part of why they needed to keep him. On the field, he's very good. Now, is he as good as A.J. Brown? Well, you can debate that. And I think most people would favor A.J. Brown. I think the only question with him is more about health, right?
Right.
And availability. But A.J. Brown is really, really good, obviously. I think Terry's maybe right below where he's at, I think, but he's really, really good. And, he's a guy that every year gets a little bit better. He knows what he needs to work on, and he goes and does it because he wants to get better. So you need to have guys like that. He's very effective. They added, I think, with Wentz. I think you guys anybody listening to this knows Carson Wentz. He's not always going to be a pinpoint passer. You better have a guy that he trusts on the other end. I think he'll have that with McLaurin. And I think Jahan Dotson too. So I think that's where his importance is for a quarterback like Wentz, who knows that this guy can win a contested catch. And he runs such good routes. He's going to be where he needs to be. So I think that's a big part of his importance as well.
Yeah, McLaurin has had, I believe, 8 quarterbacks in just a few years. Mm-hmm. Yeah, now you're bringing Carson Wentz. And I think dating back to the 91, you've had 31 quarterbacks for Washington. So now you have Carson Wentz. Is Carson Wentz the answer? And I know people say these kind of things all the time, but can he provide some stability there? But, he's been through now 3 teams in 3 years.
Yeah. And I don't think you can say that at this point. What I can say is it got off to a good start this spring.
But it's only spring.
Exactly. That's all. That's what I say. The only thing we know right now is that's where it's at. And we can't say that he's a long-term answer because I don't think they know that. They might say that publicly, but I don't think you can say that with confidence because he's probably looked good in a lot of springs for the last few years.
Sure.
So I think you need to see what he does. I think he has a better chance here for a couple reasons. One, in Philly, I think the whole Jalen Hurts thing, it sounds like that certainly derailed him a little bit.
Oh, that 100%. It goes back to you got injuries, the Nick Foles situation.
Right.
And then they draft Jalen Hurts. And that was the end. I mean, that was truly the end. Think about it. They just gave him $100 million. Then they draft Jalen Hurts.
Second round. Yeah.
If you're Carson as a human being, they're not baseball cards. If you talk about it as a human being, of course. But the Eagles made a business decision and they went, right. Carson's not healthy.
Right. And they're not even blaming the Eagles. It's just, I think that now you can also say well, you got to handle that better. Okay, that's fine. Then in Indy, he goes to a team that had Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck, Phillip Rivers. Here, he's not following that lineage. And He doesn't have Jalen Hurts here. And they're not going to draft a Jalen Hurts. They weren't going to do that this year. And I think you look at this quarterback class, you can understand why they weren't going to. Well, they drafted Sam Howell in the 5th round, but they weren't going to draft anybody high. So I think that gives him a better chance to maybe feel good about where he's at. That's part of the hope. And I think some of the players here feel like because I think it's a lot more of I don't know if this makes, I think they like where they're at with him. And I think they feel like there's a lot of similar mindsets maybe on that offense with him. But, you also know, you hear things that you got to be, until you get through a season, you can't just assume what he's going to do or how he's going to handle a situation. And I think, not everything that in Indy last year was all his fault. But he also didn't play well in the last couple of games.
Well, his issues are really the same. It's the same few things. His mechanics, his throwing slot motion, his arm, his footwork, and holding on to the football way too long. It's led to sacks. It's led to turnovers. That's been his biggest issue, is trying to do too much, almost like the old school. And he's a huge Brett Favre fan. And Brett Favre was, this gunslinger. He kind of models his game a little bit after Brett. I don't want to call him a poor Brett Favre, but holding on to the football, his mechanics have been all over the place. I've talked to Ron Jaworski and other people about this that really know the ins and outs of it. If he corrects that, he has a strong deep ball, and you guys have that vertical deep threat in Washington that could really be beneficial. But the holding on to the football, the footwork, the arm, yeah. Absolutely.
And I think so one of the things that it's not I don't think this would be the first time to do it, but what they also have here, they like their quick game, shallow crosses, all that stuff, that they feel like he gives them a better chance there than for example, Taylor Heineke did last year. So I think they're going to feature some of that stuff early on as well. So they have deep speed. They have a fast receiving core with McLaurin is fast. Jahan Dotson is fast. Curtis Samuel's fast. De'Ami Brown is fast. I don't think, and none of them are in the Tyreek Hill category, but they're all fast. So it gives you a chance to use different areas of the field with that speed and not always force them to maybe hold on to the ball down the field. So I think that's something that I'll be curious to see. How does that develop? Is that, because Jeff, we always hear things in the spring that sound good on paper, and you get to the season and you realize that's not what happened at all. Or you hear a guy oh, we're going to feature this guy this year, and you get to the season, it's the same old thing, because eventually you go back to who you are. So I don't want to go overboard saying anything on him, but I do know he's an upgrade here, and he's got all those issues. I think any quarterback they would have gotten would have had issues in some area. And, but I do think coming here, maybe getting away from whatever burden you felt here, or whatever disrespect you felt here or whatever lineage you're following here. And everybody assumed that Frank Reich could get him back to where he was. Maybe it's good to break away from that group and just start over here. It's going to be a lot more low key and Ashburn just, he's a guy I think likes to, the North Dakota roots, and like Ashburn is not in the city, so right. Maybe, I don't know if that, they're looking for every way it can that like, why is this situation different? Maybe it's because of this, maybe it's because of that. And ultimately it's just, you have to go produce and you've got to be a little bit more of a leader. I think, as you know, like everybody would describe him as a type A type personality.
Yeah.
Not the warm, bubbly type that maybe brings other guys in.
Carson is a nice guy.
Yeah, that's what I was.
There has been some disconnect with teammates, but you look over the course of the season, there's, 60, 70 guys that come in and out of that locker room to be able to get along with every single one of them. Yeah, let's not be naive about it. They're not all best friends. And so, but Carson is a nice guy and he has a really strong work ethic. And I think he has a good command of the huddle. It's just these little things. And look, in the NFL, I know it's the business, but imagine your workflow being decided by a 2-second decision with 300-pound linemen trying to rip your head off. And so I always go, think about if you have 2 seconds to make a career decision with 300-pound guys trying to rip your head off, how many mistakes would you make?
Yeah, well, I'd probably be through the wall behind me. So, but yeah, I know. And so I do think, like, first of all, it's funny because covering Washington, we saw Wentz make some of those moves that were just like, oh my God, they were jaw-dropping before the injury. And you wonder, like, when you have those types of injuries, and I saw with Robert Griffin III, he went from being a guy who felt he could get out of any situation because of his speed and all that to a guy who couldn't. And it changes how you have to approach your game. So will he do that? Will he be surrounded by enough talent in the passing game here to offset some of those issues? And I think it's also, they're also going to have to live with some of those issues. Going in that Carson Wentz will have a couple picks where you start going, what was that?
Right.
You have to live with that because that's part of the package. But if he goes 27-7 here this year with his TD to interceptions, as someone else told him after he got here, they'll build a statue for him because it's been so bad here for so long that they just want some level of, when Kirk Cousins was here, they had a guy who could play quarterback. He was better. I think he's gotten better subsequently with a few things, but I think that was something that, like, they need to get back to somebody who can be a professional starting quarterback. And if he gives them that, then he gives them more hope that they can do something in this division.
Is Washington convinced he's the long-term answer under center? Look, Troy Aikman, the Hall of Famer and NFL broadcaster, said this is probably his last chance to prove he's a franchise quarterback.
Yeah, I don't think, like I said, I think if they say that publicly,
and they have been, they're big supporters of Wentz, obviously.
And they have. I would say, I think there's still you still got to wait and see. I don't think they fully know. If they fully knew, they'd probably redo his contract and give him an extension. They haven't done that. He's got 2 years left, no guaranteed money after this year. So I think there's still a wait and see, where can you take you? Because, you can like X, Y, and Z right now. You can say, like, hey, we really like this. We really like this. But you still got to see it play out. How does he play out in all facets before you can go there? I think he's got a chance to be a guy here for at least several years. But beyond that, I just think it's too early to go there.
Well, Tyler Heineke does not think he's the answer as a starting quarterback. I mean, he started the majority of the games last year, but Taylor Heineke, he kind of said it that he doesn't think he has a shot to compete with Carson Wentz. And look, he's obviously right, but does that kind of mess with the locker room in a sense of you want that guy acting as if he's the starting quarterback as well?
I think all the players know it too. Like, they know what they're paying Carson. They know what they gave up for him. There's no competition there. Players, I think, understand that. I think as long as Heineke is taking the same approach that he's had in the past with his preparation, when he gets in there, does he know the same stuff, et cetera? That's how they'll read him. If he's not prepared because of that, that's when you get in trouble. But if you're always prepared, you can, like, I think when he said that too, it's stating reality. They brought Carson Wentz in here to start, period. And they've always viewed Heineke as a good backup. So, and I think like with Heineke, he'll always be prepared because even, last year he knew with Fitzpatrick that there was some struggles with Fitzpatrick learning the offense. So he felt like I've got a shot here if I go do this in the summertime, just because this guy's having a hard time picking up all aspects of it. So I think he'll always be prepared. But yeah, I don't think it'll cause any problems because players, they know what they gave up for him. They know the difference. They see the difference in those guys. And it's not like every player thought that Heineke was the bomb, right? There are guys that you hear like they know what level he's at. They know it. They may respect him about his story. They may respect how he plays and how he approaches, but they also know that there's some limitations there.
You just don't hear a quarterback or really anyone say that though. So that threw me a little bit.
It was very honest.
Yeah. And you love the honesty. So you want this honesty. So you don't want to criticize the guy for being honest. You just don't hear it much. So I think kind of got everyone's attention. No. So you have Carson, you re-sign McLaurin, you draft Dotson. It looks like all the pieces offensively potentially are there to be an explosive offense. For Ron Rivera going into his third season, is he on the hot seat by any means, or does he really have the command of this team in a sense to be able to just build something long-term, or is he potentially on the hot seat here?
I wouldn't say on the hot seat. I think he's on that, like curious eye look, like, what are you going to do now? And because it's his third year, and the first year they win the division 7-9. And, I think they could thank Nate Sudfeld for some of that. But they did do well that year for what was expected and what they had, et cetera. But you need to show some real progress this year. And I think he knows it. So I don't think he's on the hot seat going in there. I think if they don't have a good year, though, then he becomes on a really big hot seat because then you're going into year 4. I don't think anything happened. Like, to me, a hot seat means if you don't finish in the playoffs, you don't win, whatever, that could be fired unless they have this massive disaster. If they go 4-13, well, then all bets are off. Right. If they're in that 7-10 win range, I still think it's like all right, now you got to win in year 4. You've got no choice. So I think it'd be a lukewarm, you better, see some progress. He's been optimistic because it is year 3 in Carolina. They took a big jump, also had Cam Newton, and a really, really good defense. So I think that's his expectations have been, this is the year to take the jump.
Commanders defensive coordinator Jack Del Rio made some controversial comments about the insurrection at the Capitol. Ron Rivera fined him, I believe, $100,000 as well. Has that impacted the locker room or the organization as a team, or is that at this point forgotten about, water under the bridge, we've all moved on?
Well, I think we'll find out in training camp because right now, obviously, everybody's on vacation. So I don't know how much. I will say at the time, there are definitely some players who didn't like it, but the question was, does it impact anything?
Sure.
And I talked to multiple people, connected to players, whether it's agents, managers, friends. Not anybody even hesitated saying it's not an issue. And, it's like it was a variety of races, whatever. It wasn't. So even if they felt like some players didn't like it or would have had a problem with it, they didn't think it would affect the locker room. And now I also think some of that is because like Chase Young gets along with Del Rio really well. In fact, when I talk to somebody close to him, he's like, oh, that's Jack's his guy. So, I think if you had some like Malcolm Jenkins, then you're looking at a veteran who has the respect of the locker room, can use his voice to maybe say something. And then it's like, wait a minute here. They don't necessarily have that guy on this defense. And John Allen came out and said, who's a respected veteran guy, like, as long as a guy works hard for me, that's all I really care about. We're only here to win. That's what, so, if it doesn't have anything to do with that, like whatever you think politically, whatever you say, I don't care. So like that seems to be was the primary theme of that whole situation. How it plays out, if they don't get off to a good start and he's not calling a good D, that'll be a bigger issue. If they have a problem with how they're being used, that's a bigger issue to me. And I think then it coincides with blah, blah, blah. Oh, and this. And keep in mind, last thing on this, these guys have had a couple of years with Del Rio. I don't know that anything he has said may have shocked them all that much.
All right, last thing for you, real quick. Chase Young coming back from that ACL injury. Timetable. When can Commanders fans see him back on the field?
So that's a good question. My guess is he would not be. If I had to get, I'm guessing right now, probably not ready for the start of the season. I think that's asking a lot. He tore his ACL and MCL in November. So this type of surgery had probably lengthened his recovery. So I could see him missing the first few games. Philly would be in that possible range, but it wouldn't shock me if he missed the first 4. I just don't. I think it's a little, not too early to say he wouldn't start the season, but it's a little early to say, well, how many games will he miss? But I think it's good. I think he will miss a few games at the start of the season. That's just a guess because they don't even know for sure at this point. And his people would say like that what they want to make sure is just be ready when you're back.
John, great insight as always. I appreciate you joining me, and enjoy the rest of your brief summer. And I'm sure we'll be catching you on your ESPN and ESPN.com and all those great reports that you file for ESPN on the Commanders.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate you having me on, and good luck with this.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Great insight from Washington Commanders insider John Keim, who covers the team daily for ESPN. You can read more of his stuff on ESPN.com as well as his Twitter, John_Keim, and check out his podcast. It's a great one, the John Keim Report. Speaking of podcasts, if you like what you heard, click on the subscribe button, bottom of your screen. Also, click the bell button on YouTube, and you'll be alerted whenever we release a new episode. You can also listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all your favorite podcast apps. Click on the links in the description below. Thanks for watching and listening. We'll see you next time. I'm Jeff Skversky on Inside the Huddle, presented by Sportskeeda.